Hi there.
Hi there.
Welcome to Cinnamon Roll Adventures. If you're new here, I'd highly suggest you start from the beginning because this will make a whole lot more sense. But if you've been following along this entire time, welcome back to... So, you may recall from a few videos ago that I did this. So yeah, as it turns out, that was a mistake. So I recently found out that the seat rails on these buses is actually structural. When I removed these, it was the fall of 2023 and I only just found out about this about a month ago. So yeah, at some point in the future I'm gonna have to figure out some way to fix that. I have a few ideas already, but no matter what I do, I can't just put the seat rails back on again because I destroyed them in the process of getting them off, and I also used some of the material from them to fix other stuff, which you'll see a bit of in this video. One other thing I wanted to address was a comment that I received about my air brakes licensing. In it, this individual was saying that if I am not using it for commercial purposes, that my bus does not require an air brakes license. I don't know where this individual is from, but the area that I live in is Ontario, Canada, and I'm glad this person said something because it essentially forced me to look into this. I actually went to my local drive to center to ask, and as it turns out, regardless of the weight class or if it's being used for private or business purposes, if any vehicle has air brakes, you must have an air brakes endorsement on your license in order to be able to drive it in Ontario, Canada. So to the person who made that comment, thank you for bringing that up. I was able to clarify this issue and confirm the steps that I need to take in order to legally drive my bus in the future. Now that that's all cleared up, let's get to work. In order to get the floors up, I needed to remove some stuff that was in the way. First, I used a grinder to remove the bolt holding the seatbelt buckle thingy to the floor. After that, I did the same with the seatbelt itself, and then removed the seatbelt pulley from the wall. Continuing on from the theme from last week's video, I removed more of the trim from around the windows, which I quickly realized were actually holding the driver's side window in place. To make it so that the window wouldn't fall out, I drove a couple screws back in as a temporary measure. After that, I turned my attention back to the floor. Originally, it wasn't my plan to remove the plywood from under the driver's seat, but based on how much rust was under the floors of the rest of the bus, I decided that in order to be safe, I should probably investigate. I started by removing these trim pieces from the stairwell, followed by the stair treads themselves. As it turns out, this was a smart move because the treads were hiding quite a bit of rust. My next step was to start pulling up the plywood off the metal subfloor. This turned out to be a bit of a challenge because the floor was quite rotten, which meant that the plywood didn't want to come up in one piece. It wasn't easy, but after quite a struggle, I managed to get it out. Now there was a piece of wood under the pedals, and originally I was going to use the grinder to cut the screws holding it in, but that turned out to be too much of a hassle, so I just pried the silly thing off. In last week's video I looped this coolant hose, but in doing so I introduced a kink. The easiest fix for this was to simply cut the hose and fit this leftover 90-degree copper bend. You may notice that I have a bad habit of jumping around a lot in these videos, and this time is no different. So here I am removing yet more trim pieces from around the windows. I think this is because as I was working on stuff, I kept finding stuff that I'd missed the last time, and it would bother me so much that I just had to remove it right away. I can't deny that it was super satisfying though. Of course, taking off so much material also meant that I had a lot of junk to clean up, so I had to get rid of it all. Some of the switches I wanted to keep, but they were still in their housing, so I went into the nice warm barn and pulled them apart. As you can see, I had a bit of an issue with condensation buildup on the ceiling of the bus. This was because I filmed this during the fall of 2023, and there were quite a lot of temperature swings which led to moisture beating up and rolling down behind the hat channels. This caused puddling on the floor, which made a mess and also made rust removal difficult. My solution to the problem? A fan. And that seemed to work. That issue figured out, I turned my attention back to what I started in the last week's video, rust removal. Now that I'd removed the plywood from under the driver's area, I could now finish removing the majority of the caked on rust from the metal floors. At this point in time, temperatures were regularly dropping below 10 degrees Celsius. You may be asking why that's relevant, but the answer to that question is that most rust paints should not be applied below 10 degrees Celsius. This meant that once I'd gotten the rust cleaned up, I could basically do nothing more until the weather warmed back up in the spring. So instead I found other things to work on. There were still these big holes around the wheel wells, so I decided to make them my next project. As per the norm, I found very quickly that this job took a lot longer than I had originally anticipated. So remember at the beginning of the video when I said that I'd used some of the seat rail material to fix other stuff? Here's one example of that. I cut the rusted areas of the floor into these rectangle shapes and attempted to cut the seat rail material to match. I say attempted because, as it turns out, I suck at cutting straight lines. By the way, if you're wondering how I cut these out, it was a combination of a sawzall and a grinder with cutoff wheels. I used a magnet to hold the sheet of steel in place and then started welding it. Now keep in mind that at the time I was doing this, I was not a very good welder. Actually, I'm still not a very good welder. Anyways, as I was saying, it took a lot of experimentation to get the heat and wire speed settings right. This metal was very thin and the welder that I run uses flux core wire, so this was very tricky. At first, I just tacked everything into place, and after that, I slowly worked my way into trying to get the metal to actually bond to the bus. The resulting welds, I will admit, were pretty bad, but the metal was on there and I had a plan for how to fill the gaps later. So I'm just gonna go ahead and apologize for the camera angle on these shots. I forgot to take into account that my head would be in the way of the welds, so after reviewing this footage, I fixed the issue in the coming videos. After I got that first hole filled, I moved on to the next one. while I work on that, I'd like to ask all of you for a favor. If you're liking this content and you feel so inclined, I would be very much appreciative if you could like this video and subscribe. I'm trying to grow this channel so that one day I can go on the road and bring you more adventure content. So if you want to see more of that, go ahead and click that subscribe button. Yeah, this was one of those days where I was very tired and then the camera fell over. Never let anyone tell you that filming bus work is easy, because it isn't. Now, when I measured this, I forgot to take into account that I suck at cutting straight lines, so there was a lot of trimming involved to get this piece of metal to fit. Yeah, that happened more often than I would like to admit. I probably should have had more magnets to hold the metal in place, but I was either too cheap or too lazy to get more. In my opinion, the welds on this patch were much better than the first one I did. You can see that the beads are much more consistent and will probably hold much better. And that's all for this video. It may be a shorter one, but I packed a lot into a very short time period. But if that wasn't enough for you, well, I do have another channel. It's called Cinebeam, and it mostly focuses on gaming content. So if you're into that sort of thing, feel free to give it a look. I'll leave a link in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, enjoy your day, and I'll see you next time.